Depending on which episode you're watching, this show was either a cinematic masterpiece or the dumbest people making the dumbest decisions repeatedly for 25 minutes. Let's talk about Merlin, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of me ranting about shows I adore. This time, instead of historical analysis like I did with my Good Omens video, which, let's be real, was like 30% historical analysis, 70% my opinions, I will actually be backing up this video with mostly my opinions, a touch of historical accuracy, and some drawings to display what I would have changed if I had been on the design team for the BBC's Merlin. As I'm sure for many others, Merlin was definitely my introduction, my awakening, if you would, into the world of history, and into the world of fantasy, and into the world of historical fantasy, and an introduction and an awakening in lots of other stuff. I have a thing for knights now, you guys. Like a major thing for knights. To begin my design process, I would first need to establish my context. So we're gonna do that. The context of the world in which our story takes place, when our story takes place, and how our characters fit into this world and when it is really essential to build on top of what we already know and would have had designed from the show. So far as the where and when, the show is oh so helpful and gives us in a land of myth and a time of magic, which is so specific. Isn't it just? The most unhelpful hints as to when and where this is supposed to take place. According to Arthurian legend, and also Arthurian people who actually study history from this time, namely Jimmy the Welsh Viking, he is going to be my main source during this video, just because he is so good at pointing you in the right direction when it comes to Arthurian legend. He may not be specialized, like, in Arthurian legend. I know Vikings is mainly his thing, and Welsh history, but yeah, he'll get you started in the right direction like that. So far as historians can tell, Arthurian times would have taken place in sub-Roman Britain in the 5th or the 6th century. But most of the romantic stories and legends and epic poems that a lot of Arthurian myth and legend come from were written in the 12th century and onward. So that's a lot of time. That's, what is math? 700 years? Math. 800? Hundreds. I'm not too worried about this because the further you go back in time, the slower fashion evolves. And so I would be willing to refer to clothing from the 5th to the 12th or 11th century when it comes to being accurate. And I would go even further into the 1350s to 1400s, because that is when some interesting stuff happened visually with clothing that I think a lot of us associate fantasy medieval with. A lot of Renaissance tailoring began in the 1350s, and I want to bring that in, especially with the women's clothing. It is very helpful, though, that this is a land of myth and a time of magic, technically, if we're going strictly with the show. So, in a world where dragons, prophecy, and magic are all around us, we have some permission to be inaccurate. I'm gonna plan on trying for like 40% history, 60% stunning visuals. And even if those stunning visuals take from other points in time, I'm not gonna count them towards the historical side of things just because it's not accurate if it's not from the correct period. Yeah. That made sense. I'd like to prioritize the idea of historical shapes and textures within the clothing, as well as color and ornamentation, because at this point in time and in this place in time, sub-Roman Britain, 5th to 12th century. The rainbow of colors is a literal rainbow of colors. Medieval dyes are very, very good at what they do. You don't have like neon pink or anything, but you have neon yellow, actually. So yeah, you can even get neons. Magic is gonna be my really big excuse here, but I can't always blame magic for costumes in a kingdom in which magic is banned. So a character who is independent of Camelot and magical would be much more anachronistic and inaccurate than a character of Camelot who is magical, and they will be even more inaccurate than a character of Camelot who is not magical. And so I also think that it would be a cool way to define characters and their relationship to magic through accuracy. Because I am going for the medieval fantasy vibe, obviously I'm going to draw inspiration from other media out there. Some of the content that I really was inspired by throughout this process was Lord of the Rings, of course, Narnia. Love the costumes in Narnia. They're fantastical, but also they don't pull you out of it. They're good at being fantasy. Game of Thrones, which is good stuff. It's closer to Tudor-inspired clothing than it is to medieval-inspired clothing, but the Game of Thrones spin-off House of the Dragon has some wonderful medieval-inspired clothing that I think is really going to come in clutch, especially for the knights in armor things. I find that all these franchises really are good at blending character and costume together harmoniously, and they adhere to a fairly strict aesthetic. Not too strict, though, because let's be honest, this show is anything but strict with its accuracy and or comedic effect. I'm going to start off with our male characters and finish with our female characters. We're going to start talking about armor, because the first design I did was a knight. Armor was not a thing. Not a thing. Not a thing. Yes, you could have a helmet, you could have a shield, you could have the odd bits and bobs as time went on further. Plate armor, full plate especially, not a thing until the 16th century in Britain, and that is a little farther than I would like to go so far as adhering to history. However, I do enjoy that in the BBC Merlin, they put their knights only in mail regularly, and usually it's only Arthur who will have a single pauldron and or plate or sword stopper. That is not what that is called, but there's something here that is, it functions as a sword stopper, but it's not a sword stopper. So I will not be mentioning plate armor during this video, and that is why. Building out from the inside, we start our men's outfits with a tunic or a shift for underneath their clothing. It will be cut as economically as possible from cloth of a linen or flax, something that absorbs sweat well. This linen shift was often white, simply because you can get it to white pretty fast, otherwise it's an off-white color, just naturally. On top of the linen shift is the tunic. The tunic is cut very similarly to the shift, and it has and like the shift, it would have a slit going down the center front so that you could fit your head through, and you could pin, tie, whatever you need to do to keep it closed if you want it to keep closed, but otherwise it's not like gonna bust open unless you're standing in front of a fan, posed like a cover of a romance novel. Your outer tunic would be knee length or ankle length. For all of our knights and our younger characters, I think that seeing them in ankle-length tunics would be off-putting, and also they're very active, so I'm going to give them some knee-length tunics. These tunics could be, as I mentioned, an array of colors. The medieval rainbow of dyes was a rainbow. You can use your imagination. Alright? Keeping with Camelot colors, most of their garments will be red, but I've put my knight in a yellow tunic, because I think that giving it sort of a yellow-gold color is a nice way to show off how you can have lots of different colors, but also keeping with the Camelot colors. Down on the bottom of our knight's body, we can have pairs of trousers, but we can also have pairs of brays with hose tied to them as well, and the hose would also act as your socks. I've put our knight in a pair of woolen trousers, dyed a darker color. I think it would be cool if they were like a dark navy blue, but black is possible. It's difficult, but it's possible. Then, assumedly, since our knight is wearing trousers, not hose, he would also have on a pair of socks and some lovely vegetable tanned leather shoes. My favorite pair of medieval shoes is the ones with the little crossover piece in the front of the ankle and a little knob to keep them closed. There are other styles, and we'll see them throughout this video, but these are my favorites, so I'm giving them to our lovely little knight. Over top his outfit, we are going to start armoring him up and give him a mail shirt. Over this mail shirt, I am giving him a tabard, which is a piece of clothing worn by knights, usually with iconography or sigils of their house, and split down the sides and the front into 4 pieces for ease of movement. Plus, I think that there is nothing more knightly looking than this, and it's accurate, so I'm including it because I want to, and it's my video. Over top his tabard, he will have a nice vegetable tanned leather belt, and since he is a higher up in the world as a knight, his belt would have lovely accents on it for the end of his belt as well as the buckle. Attached to his belt would be his sword scabbard as well as his sword. These would both be in a Roman style, as this is sub-Roman Britain. And of course, over top all of this, we have to give our knight that classic knightly Camelot look as they all waltz about the castle in their long flowing capes looking very majestic. However, cloaks, definitely a thing. Capes, sure. Cloaks are more common, and I love the way a good drapey over the shoulder cloak with a good pin and circle. Pin, badge, pin and circle, badge, pin badge. Anyway, I love that look, but it would require a great deal of fabric to fall all the way to the floor. Luckily, we are in a fantasy world, and I have an unlimited budget since this is all made up. So, I will give our knight a floor-length cloak with a lovely bunched up around the shoulders look, and a beautiful pin, maybe with some Camelot dragon-themed symbols and things carved into it. I also would like it noted that yes, I did inspire the hair after Gawain, because I simply adore Gawain. He is busted in our house, and it is so hot in here. We've got all the fans going, which keeps it cool enough, but it's not enough. Let's talk about Arthur. Arthur, King of the Britons. First up is his full-on, battle-ready King Arthur look. In the show, Arthur has the awful Justin Bieber 2000s bowl cut. I promise, I think you're beautiful. I just can't forgive the haircut. So I'm going to give him some luscious locks, a la Leon in the show, Gawain in the show, and of course, King Peter from Narnia. Not the young Peter, he also has 2000s bowl cut syndrome. I mean aged up Peter towards the very end. That is what I want head up King Arthur to look like. I've gone ahead and given him a lovely big bold crown as well, and I haven't gone into a ton of detail about the weapons and such, and the crown is also something that I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about because I have tons of inspiration for this, but when you're considering costume design for a production, you also have to consider the props department all the time. There's a lot of crossover between what is costumes and what is props. Swords, bit of a gray area. And in this case, a crown can be kind of a gray area. I'm not too worried about it though, because Arthur almost never wears his crown in the series. Now, Arthur will be dressed much like his knights. I have put him in full red though, not simply red and yellow, as I want to make him as Camelot as possible. I have lined the sides of his tabard with gold edging and braid that could be added onto tunics, tabards, and the like. I've also given him some gold braid on the ends of his tunic, and on the ends of his mail I have added gold rings. I've also given him a chainmail cowl, as I would ideally like him to be going into battle with a wonderfully ornate, like, jewel-encrusted gold helmet if they have a battle scene. But also, I think that him having a cowl with the gold rings around will add some sort of regal otherness to him that will define him alongside his knights. I have not added a cloak for him because of the cowl, but he would have a cloak if he wanted one. I would pin his cloak in the center, not side to side. I would still have a single brooch to pin in the center. I wouldn't do a clasp brooch because I don't think that looks right. But once again, to differentiate him from the knights, if they're all fully in cloaks wrapped up, I want him to have something that differs. Also, just for a fun little detail on the dragon sigil on his tabard, I added a little crown on top of his dragon, and I like to think that any sigils that he would wear beside his knights would have a little crown on the dragon. I've also drawn his sword hilt differently. As I said, I would have to debate this with the props department if I was on a production, but his sigil is a dragon. They have a dragon beneath the keep. They fought the dragons. It's in previous wars. Like, it's a thing. So, I would take inspiration from House of the Dragon, where several of the swords, like this one that Rhaenyra picks up when she's debating whether or not to take up the role as the warrior queen, and especially also Dark Sister, which is the sword Daemon wields. They both have these dragon wing-like motifs on the hilts, and I think that would be so cool to incorporate for Arthur. While I put our knight in trousers to appeal to modern audiences, I would fully be willing to put a man in full hose and brairs for the brairs and full hose. And I think that if you didn't have the hose perfectly fitted to the leg, and specifically put the bunching that could happen around the ankle, it would be historical hose, but it would look trouser-ish and still appeal to modern audiences. I've once again used the crossover in front style shoe simply because it's my favorite. For Arthur here, I've made them a little taller than the others so that they sit a little higher up on the ankle. And boots were a thing that you could wear in this time, so making them a little boot-ish isn't entirely wrong. For our casual off-duty Arthur look, he is going to be having all the same base layers, of course. He can have his shift, he can have his tunic. We'll put him in brairs and hose again because I think that he should wear hose. I've made his hose a much lighter color just because I think it seems more relaxed and less intense. He's just having a day about the castle. He's not riding off into battle, you know? I've given him a similar pair of shoes from before. I think it would be cool if he had different pairs of shoes, but in different, like, intensities of color. I've given him some braid on the ends around the neck and the sleeves of his tunic, simply because why not? If you can make it fancy, make it fancy. They're not gold, but they are decorative. He would still have his belt, of course, with a lovely buckle on it, and possibly his sword if he was going to carry his sword around with him throughout the castle. Possibly not his sword. Who's to say? I'm not an expert on sword etiquette. I'm here to give you my opinions on clothing. Because I think that he would look very attractive this way, I have put him in a half up, half down style with his hair, a la what I wish Sir Leon would have done in the original show. I would have been so weak for that man. If Sir Leon with a man bun, he would have been too powerful. Also, depending on what point in the show we're in, I think it would be cool if Arthur wore a chain with like a ring from Gwen on it, like he did at one point. Or just a pendant, because jewelry was a thing and was popular and was a cool way to show off wealth, and I think jewelry should be incorporated more. So a necklace for Arthur, as well as possibly some bracelets if he wanted, or some rings, you know? I mean, ice him up. Is that a thing? I feel like I sound old saying that. Ice him up. I know ice is a thing for, like, you know, you've got ice. I obsess over fantasy media. I do not keep up with, like, the sayings of the youth. It is also at this point that I would like to say that because the tunics were cut center front to allow room for putting your head through, we can absolutely have the deep cut, deep V, slutty little peak of chest that we get from Arthur often in this show. I will never get rid of that. It's historically accurate, which is important. But more importantly, it looks great. I will not be argued with on this point. Moving on. I needed another one of these because I'm just not handling this heat well. Let's talk about our boy Merlin. Starting on his head, his hair, I'm gonna let it be fine. Close shaves to the head were definitely a thing that you could do. So, firstly, Percival. Look at him being historically accurate. You go, boy. Love Percival. Also, my favorite Percival meme is that he was wearing full chainmail originally, and then one day he just flexed so hard that all the arm pieces popped off, and that's why he's sleeveless all the time. Fully believe that. That would still be in my show. So I will let it be the theory that Merlin had a close shave to his head at one point and is growing it out. And that is why his hair looks the way it does. I will, however, never forgive the 2000s bowl cut syndrome. Now, for Merlin, his clothes, of course, would be a little more rumpled, a little baggier, ill-fitting, and, of course, some patches, some worn places, some discoloration, because he has fairly decent clothes. He just can't replace them as often, so he has to take care of the ones he's got. So I would like to think he has, a slightly too big tunic on him in this lovely dark blue, much like the tabards that the knights wear. It wasn't uncommon to have a slashed or sleeveless surcoat. And so I'm giving Merlin a shortened one of these in place of the little brown jacket that he wore all the time in the show. This, of course, is all belted together. His belt would have not as nice of a buckle, but I'm going to still give him a buckle, not just a tied-on belt, because, he works at the palace. Gaius is like a well-revered physician. I think Gaius would buy him, a cute little, pewter belt buckle. On his belt, I am also adding a little purse because we are often told that he goes to gather herbs for Gaius or to run errands for Arthur. So I think he would need a purse to carry around some things. Mixing popsicle colors is really not doing it for the tongue. It's just ugly. I am going to put him in a pair of darker brown hose, kind of matching his surcoat. And there are two iconic Merlin outfit staples that I will never consider getting rid of. Number one, Merlin's cute little boots. Boots were a thing that you could do at this time, and they did have flappy-ish kind of pieces that would wrap onto the ankle of the foot, and so if he wore his slightly undone to where they had this folded over appearance, it's completely believable that he could have shoes that do that. So I will be giving Merlin his cute little boots. I will also be giving Merlin his neckerchief. I have no historical evidence that I can source for this. I have done no research into it because I simply do not care. Merlin needs his little hanky around his neck. And I also firmly believe that because it's almost always red, he is cutting them out of Arthur's old shirts. It's just such a cute idea. Gaius. Quite possibly one of the most chaotic characters in the entire show. He fully convinces Arthur that Merlin is a drunk, slaps the king's bald head. Yeah, I know he was possessed, but still. Backtalks royals constantly, is magical, and performs magic fairly consistently, yet has not been killed. An iconic old man, if I've ever seen one. I decided to keep Gaius' original hair. I did actually get in trouble with my roommate once because I once compared her hair to Gaius's. Pro tip, don't do that if you want to keep your friends. Unlike the younger characters, I do think that Gaius is appropriately dressed when he is in ankle-length tunics, so I'm going to leave him in ankle-length tunics. he's pretty well done in the show. Like, doesn't look out of place historically. So I'm going to give him his ankle-length tunic. I'm going to add some braid to that. I'm going to give him green hose, because why not? As well as some lovely ornate kind of twisty tie-up sandal shoes, because I love the look of these, but they just look too slippery for me to want to give them to one of my younger male characters, you know? On his belt, I also would have him have multiple multiple pouches and such for carrying around his herbs and medicines and money. Over top his tunic, I would have him wear a sleeveless surcoat, sort of like Merlin's, but longer and nicer. I'm putting him in blues and greens. And along his surcoat, I would also want some sort of trim and braid stitched on to be very decorative and a little more ornate, since he is the court physician and is a bit higher up. Also, as with Merlin, you may have noticed that besides Merlin's neckerchief, all the magical associated characters thus far have been dressed in cool toned colors, and all of my non-magic have been dressed in warm toned colors. I wanted Merlin and Gaius to be separated from Camelot itself, so that they are not so aligned with the anti-magicness of it all. Let's talk about the Lady Morgana. I have drawn her in a shift, and then over top of that, a tailored fitted dress. This is further in time, closer to that 14th, 15th century vibe, early Renaissance tailoring that's coming in here. But I think it really serves Morgana's character, because she is supposed to be very pretty. She is supposed to be an ornament to court. But because she is closer associated with magical characters, I am keeping her in cool toned colors. I've put her in a dress that laces up the front and buttons at each of the sleeves to achieve that fitted look. And then over top of that, I've put her in a sleeveless surcoat, much like Merlin and Gaius's, except for hers, it is oversized and it is of a sheer silk that would have been available at the time, and in a color that is a lovely blue. The sheer silk surcoat and the dress are both belted in at the waist with a lovely metal belt, and I've put her in silver, once again not aligning with Camelot gold, because she is often at odds with the crown. As for her headwear, I have put her in an accurate hood and wimple, which is meant to cover the chest and neck as well as the hair. I have allowed her to have some hair. Her hair would be braided and put up, but I have allowed her to have hair around the face, because having completely put away hair does read very nun to the modern eye. And so I think that it's perfectly acceptable to have her have some tendrils around the face, but still have the tucked away and veil thing. However, I do understand the appeal that often comes with Morgana's outfits. Big fan. So I would make both the hood and wimple out of a sheer silk. That way you could still get a whiff of like sexy vibes, but not outright like, here they are, you know? It's evil Morgana time. Because Morgana is farthest from the crown and Camelot as she can be so far as alliances go, and very deep into magic and evilness, I think that she can be as historically inaccurate as she wants during this time. So I'm putting her in full black, head to toe. Her hair is down. It's in the weird rat's nest of tangles that she has when she turns evil. I do not think I would put her in such a significant amount of eyeliner, but that's just me. She would have a big black cloak with an evil-looking pin at the front, and I would put her in a very fitted, very tailored Renaissance-style dress with big sleeves and a cinched waist and a long, flowing, inconvenient skirt, even though being a hermit witch living in the woods wouldn't really serve that, you know? I've also just given her a simple tassel-like belt for her to, I don't know, hang dead mice from, whatever witches do. And her shoes I would have be a dark leather, and I would make them black because why not? Magic, right? And they are in this medieval style that is kind of an unfolding shoe, or a drawstring shoe. And I would have hers have as much of a pointed toe as possible, because something about pointy toes speaks evil to me. Last but not least, let's talk about my girl Gwen. I have given her a peasant look and a royal look. For Gwen's peasant look, we're gonna go very medieval with this. We're gonna go tunics and shifts and loose baggy clothing. I would put Gwen in a tunic shift underneath all of her clothing that often she could roll up if she wanted. I feel like rolled sleeves really gives like servant vibes. It's giving servant. Someone take the mic away from me. So I would give her a long sleeve under tunic shift rather than a short sleeve one. That way she could have them rolled up and visible to really put in the servant vibes, you know? Over top of that, I would give her a tunic, short sleeved, once again, showing off the rolled sleeves. And I would make this a purpley bluey color because Gwen, my favorite looks that she wore were always like purple, blue, pinks. I think made her look very soft and sweet, and the girl Arthur fell in love with. It's that. Over top of her tunic, sort of along the same lines as the surcoat, I would give her a apron sort of layer. I don't have historical context for this, but I think it looks very right. And also, she does wear a lot of things like this in the show, where it's sort of like half apron-y clothing type stuff. And I think it's sweet looking, so I'm going to keep it. I've tried to make it as historically logical as possible by simply making it two long rectangles that would be tacked at the shoulders, or something with just a head hole that she goes through and then belts. And I think that that is logically historical enough that it doesn't seem wholly unreasonable for her to be wearing. Her outfit would be belted at the middle, of course, with a little simple belt, maybe with a cute little buckle on it, nothing too fancy, but her father is a blacksmith, so she would have access to different metal objects. And I would like to see her in, now that I'm thinking about it, I totally forgot to draw this, but I would have liked to see her with like a little pendant or some little cuff bracelets. I think that would have added something to it, especially if they looked like rougher forged, but they still had care put into them because they're from her father. On her feet, I would put some drawstring shoes alongside some hose. And on her head, she would be wearing some sort of head covering. Her hair would be up, obviously. I would allow her to have some curly tendrils around the face, especially because Gwen's hair in the show is just so beautiful. Instead of a veil situation, I would have Gwen in a hat, which I think would be so cute, and also a great example of the different headwear that is possible. Morgan Donner made this hat, and it's a red little hood slash hat with a long tail coming off of it, and the tail can either remain down or you can wrap it up around the head to secure the hat in place even more. And I think it looks so adorable, and so I've given Gwen one, and I've made it the same purpley blue that her tunic is. Last but not least, Queen Gwen. For the Queen Gwen look, I did heavily take inspiration from Bernadette Banner's medieval dress project, because it just screams Queen of Camelot to me, and it is a very picturesque idea of medieval royal fashion. The red overdress is obviously very heavily inspired from Bernadette's outfit. I've given an extra detail to the belt, which would have it hanging down. It has all the gold metalwork in the clips across the front as well as the belt, and I would love to see some engraving on that gold work in different Camelot sigils, symbols, things like that, so dragons and battles and all that jazz. For the undersleeves that button up, I would like them in a cloth of gold, very Camelot, very Queen. I know that Bernadette Banner's sleeves are very large in her project, but I want Gwen's to be massive drag on the floor medieval sleeves, which were a thing. Some medieval ladies would have skirts, late medieval, I should say, early Renaissance, would have skirts that just fall to the floor, so much fabric, and so much fabric in the sleeves as well. And I want that for Gwen, because she deserves it. She's everything. I would, of course, also want Gwen to have some rings, as she is now queen. And, of course, she is wearing a crown secured over top her veil and wimple. Once again, to give this sort of like a modern effect to it, I would have the veil and wimple in a sheer silk. And I would want them to be a golden yellow color to match with the rest of the outfit, obviously. And I would be allowing some tendrils of hair to fall out the front. And the veil specifically, I would want cut in an oval or circle, because when you have a veil in an oval or circle like that, the hem does a really fun thing around the face where it comes out kind of squiggly, and I think that that would look super cool with the crown secured on the head, and then the squiggly veil also adding another layer of texture around the face. And I also think that would help with the modern eye processing hidden hair, because a lot of times the worry is, oh my gosh, they have to see their hair in a lovely billowing blowout coming off of their head, you know, they can't be covering it. No one does that. I think a veil would help with that, because obviously in historical costuming, you know, the most important things are hair and boobs. Clearly. But I digress. I think that a sheer veil and wimple alongside the Queen's crown is the perfect finishing touch for our Queen Guinevere look. And that is how I would change the costume design in BBC Merlin. Thank you for joining me as I tell people who are much better qualified than me how to do their job. Seriously though, thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you do have any corrections or strong opinions about anything I've mentioned, historical, fantastical, or otherwise, be sure to put it in the comments. I'm always up for hearing what y'all think, and especially corrections you may have for anything historical I've mentioned, because I'm no expert on this. I'm just doing my best to research what I can, and there are certainly others out there who are much more qualified than me. I'm getting there, but if you'd like to see me rant about other fantastical costumes and historical costumes, be sure to check out other videos on my channel. I do a rant about Good Omens and their historical costumes, as well as making my own historical and fantastical costumes. If you would like to support the channel, you can now join to become a channel member. Subscribe, comment, interact in any way you can. It always helps and always makes me feel really good to know you guys enjoy what I do. Another way to support my channel is by visiting my Patreon, my Amazon wishlist, which can be found in my link tree, as well as visiting my other social media sites. I am also on TikTok and Instagram. Or, if you're feeling real adventurous, you can find me on artbylgo.com with a gallery of my work. I had a lot of fun doing this video. If you can think of any other media that you guys might like to see me pick apart in some way, be sure to drop it in the comments below. And otherwise, I will see you next month. Have a good one, and bye! If anything you get from this video, it will be that I am not mathematically inclined. A floor-length... I just spit popsicle like everywhere.